Gabriel Garcia Marquez, born on March 6, 1927 at Aracataca, Colombia. Died April 17, 2014 at Mexico City, Mexico. He was a Colombian novelist and one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, and who was awarded the Nobel Prize of Literature in 1982, and mostly for his masterpiece Cien años de Soledad 1967, 100 Years of Solitude. So he was the fourth Latin American to be so honored, having been preceded by Chilean poet Gabriela Mistral in 1945 and Pablo Neruda in 1971, and by Guatemalan novelist Miguel Angel Asturias in 1967. And with George Luis Borges, Garcia Marquez is the best known Latin American writer in history. In addition to his masterly approach to the novel, he was a superb crafter of short stories and an accomplished journalist. In both his shorter and longer fictions, Garcia Marquez achieved the rare feat of being accessible to the common reader while satisfying the most demanding of sophisticated critics. And he was known for his capacity to create vast, minutely woven plots and brief, tightly knit narratives in the fashion of his two North American models, William Faulkner and Ernest Hemingway. The easy flow of even the most intricate of his stories has been compared to that of Miguel de Cervantes, as have his irony and overall humor. Garcia Marquez's novelistic world is mostly that of provincial Colombian, where medieval and modern practices and beliefs clash both comically and tragically. And definitely, we could say that Gabriel Marquez is an epitome of masterpiece creator and masterpiece himself. Thank you. And I'm Joel Pipito, reporting the overview of Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Good day, everyone. This is Anne Charmaine C. Tampos, and I will be reporting the characters of the story entitled 100 Years of Solitude. The book takes place over the course of 100 years, so the events and characters are described in rapid fire succession. The Bundaya characters are constructed and repeated to show the inherited family traits, the bad blood, and the repetition of mistakes. So, without further ado, let's talk about the Bundaya family in the first generation. Jose Arcadio Buendea, the patriarch of Buendea clan. Jose Arcadio Buendea is Macondo's founder and its most charismatic citizen. So he is a man of great strength and curiosity, like he impulsively embarks in mad pursuits of esoteric and practical knowledge, and it is his solitary and obsessive quest for knowledge that drives him mad at the end of his life. He spends many years, but in the end, he was tied to a tree in the Buendea backyard, speaking Latin that only the priest understands. Jose Arcadio Buendea is married to Ursula Iguaran and the father of Jose Arcadio, Colonel Aureliano Buendea and Amaranta. So next is Ursula Iguaran, the matriarch of the Buendea family. She lives so long that she loses track of her age. She is practical, energetic, and fearlessly devoted to the well-being of her family. She exhibits superhuman will and character, but although she lacks the excess of her husband, she has the entrepreneurial skills to begin a business in candy animals and pastries that keeps the family afloat during hard times. She is the wife of Jose Arcadio Buendea and the mother of Jose Arcadio, Colonel Aureliano Buendea, and Amaranta. For the second generation is Amaranta, the daughter of Jose Arcadio Bondea and Ursula Iguaran. So she never marries and spends most of her life consumed in personal bitterness towards Rebecca, who first gained the attentions of Peter Crispy. So like in many ways, her life is characterized by a fear of men. So when Peter Crispy finally falls in love with her, she rejects him and he kills himself. As penance, she gives herself a bad burn on the hand and wears a black bandage over it for the rest of her life. On the other hand, Colonel Aureliano Buendea, the second son of Jose Arcadio Buendea and Ursula Iguaran, Aureliano grows up solitary and enigmatic, with a strange capacity of extrasensory perception. So outraged by the corruption of the conservative government, he joins the liberal rebellion and becomes Colonel Aureliano Buendea, the rebel commander. So after years of fighting, he loses his capacity for memory and deep emotion, signs a peace accord, and withdraws into its workshop and a lonely-hearted man. He is a widower of Remedios Moscote and a father with Pilar Tenera, of Aureliano Jose, and of 17 sons, each named Aureliano by 17 different women. Remedios Mascate, the child bride of Colonel Aureliano Buendea. Remedios Mascate brings joy to the Buendea household for a short while before she dies suddenly, possibly of a miscarriage. So she is only 9 years old when Aureliano falls in love with her and they marry after she reaches puberty. She was a child for a very long time and after puberty did not shed all of her childish habits. But when she is married, she behaves with grace and responsibility. And next, Jose Arcadio, the first son of Ursula Iguaran and Jose Arcadio Buendea, from whom he inherits his amazing strength and his impulsive drive. So after running off in pursuit of a gypsy girl, Jose Arcadio returns a savage brute of a man and marries Rebecca, the orphan adopted by the Buendeas. He is father with Pilar Ternera of Arcadio and brother to Colonel Aureliano Buendea and Amaranta. Rebecca, the earth-eating orphan girl who mysteriously arrives at the Buendea doorstep. Rebecca is adopted by the Buendea family and they raised her as one of their own daughters and she has an intense love and hate relationship with Amaranta. Rebecca is the more beautiful of the two and garners the attention of Petra Crispy. They have a perennial engagement consummated for many years until she meets Jose Arcadio. She marries Jose Arcadio and Ursula turns out her of their house in anger for her disrespectful gestures. After Jose Arcadio's death, she barricades herself in her house and never comes out again. Moving on to the third generation, Aureliano Jose, the son of Colonel Aureliano Buendea and Pilar Ternera. He has intensely intimate relationship with Amaranta and wishes to marry her. Instead, he joins his father and the rebel forces only to desert later. He is shot in the back by the government soldier during an uprising. Next is Arcadio, the son of Jose Arcadio and Pilar Ternera. He is neglected throughout most of his childhood. After Colonel Aureliano Buendea leaves to join the Civil War, he rules the Macondo as a tyrant enforcing the most arbitrary rules he can come up with. He tries to force Pilar Ternera to go to bed with him. Instead, she introduces him to Santa Sofia de la Piedad, who bears him 3 children. He is killed by a firing squad when the liberals lose the war. Santa Sofia de la Piedad, the quiet woman almost invisible in this novel who marries Arcadio and continues to live in the Buendea house for many years after his death. Impassively intending to the family, she is the mother of Remedios the Beauty and Aureliano Segundo and Jose Arcadio Segundo. She does not quite seem to exist in the real world, and when she grows old and tired, she simply walks out of the house, never to be heard of again. Let's tackle about the characters of the fourth generation. Remedios the Beauty, the daughter of Santa Sofia de la Piedad and Arcadio. Remedios the Beauty becomes the most beautiful woman in the world. Desire for her drives men to their deaths. Not comprehending her power over men, she remains innocent and childlike. One day, she floats to heaven, leaving Macondo and the novel abruptly. Next is Jose Arcadio Segundo, the son of Arcadio and Santa Sofia de la Piedad. Jose Arcadio Segundo may have been switched at birth with his twin brother Aureliano Segundo. He sees a man executed when he was a child and cannot shake the concern that the smile on the man's face was the evidence that they buried him alive. So upheld by the witnessing an execution at an early age, Jose Arcadio Segundo becomes thin, bony, solitary, and increasingly scholarly like his great-uncle Colonel Aureliano Buendía. A cockfighter and a drifter, he finds purpose in leading the strikers against the Banana Company. He is the lone survivor of the massacre of the strikers, and when he finds out that nobody believes the massacre occurred, he secluded himself in Melquiades' old study and trying to decipher the old prophecies and preserving the memory of the massacre. So on the other hand, Aureliano Segundo, the son of Arcadio and Santa Sofia de la Piedad, Aureliano grows to be a fat hedonist, loving orgies and behaving recklessly. So although he loves the concubine Petra Cotas, he is married to the cold beauty Fernanda del Carpio, with whom he has three children, Meme, Jose Arcadio II, and Amaranta Orsola. While Fernanda del Carpio, the wife of Aureliano Segundo and the mother of Meme, Jose Arcadio II, and Amaranta Orsola, Fernanda del Carpio was raised by a family of impoverished aristocrats. She is very haughty and religious. Her dynastic husband does not love her and maintains his relationship with his concubine Petra Cotes. So Fernanda del Carpio meanwhile tries unsuccessfully to impress his sterile religion and aristocratic manners on the Buendía house. In the fifth generation, Jose Arcadio II, the eldest child of Aureliano Segundo and Fernanda del Carpio, Ursula decides that Jose Arcadio II is supposed to become the Pope, but in fact slides into dissolution and solitude. On his return from his unsuccessful trip to seminary in Italy, Jose Arcadio II leads a life of debauchery with local adolescents who eventually murder him and steals his money. So Amaranta Orsola, the daughter of Aureliano Segundo and Fernanda del Carpio, Amaranta Orsola returns from her trip to Europe with a Belgian husband, Gaston. She wants to revitalize Macondo and the Buendía household, but it is too late because they are both headed for inevitable ruin. She falls in love with her nephew Aureliano II and gives birth to his child, whom they also name Aureliano III, and who proves that the last in the Buendía line. Born of incest, he has the tail of a pig, however Amaranta dies in childbirth. Gaston, the Belgian husband of Amaranta, Ursula. Gaston is loving and cultured but feels isolated in the new desolate Macondo. He travels to Belgium to start an airmail company, and when he hears of the relationship between his wife and Aureliano II, he never returns. Lastly, Meme, the daughter of Fernanda del Carpio and Aureliano Segundo. Meme's real name is Renata Remedios. She feigns studiousness and docility to please her mother, but she is actually hedonist like her father. So when her mother discovers her illicit affair with Mauricio Babilonia, she posts a guard in front of the house and the guards end up shooting Mauricio. So he ends up paralyzed and Meme is imprisoned in a convent where she spends the rest of her life. So the product of her affair with Babilonia is Aureliano II. In the sixth generation, Aureliano II, the illegitimate son of Meme and Mauricio Babilonia, Aureliano II is concealed by his scandalized grandmother Fernanda del Carpio. He grows up a hermit in the Buendía household, only gradually acclimating himself to society. So Aureliano II becomes a scholar, and it is he who eventually deciphers the prophecies of Melquiades with his aunt Amaranta Ursula. He fathers the last in the Buendía line, the baby Aureliano III, who dies soon after birth.
100 Days of Solitude, First Generation. Jose Arcadio founded Macondo, a town far away from the capital. He and his family decided to stay in Macondo and live there. This is where the Buendía family started to live its legacy, a home in which it is founded solely for them. Ursula took the lead in looking over the family and turned matriarchal. The novel starts with Colonel Aureliano reminiscing the time when Macondo was founded by his father, and the time when gypsies come for a yearly visit led by Melquiades. Second generation. Ursula and Jose Arcadio built Macondo with their son Jose Arcadio. Colonel Aureliano Buendia is senior's second son and was first to be born in Macondo. He had 17 sons from different women, all named Aureliano. Amaranta and Rebecca became really close to each other until a guy named Pietro Crispi came and the two girls fell in love with him. Remedios Moscotti came to the town with her father, and Aureliano fell in love with her and married her. She was very young, so she died during her pregnancy. Third generation. Arcadio and Aureliano Jose had illegitimate sons with Pilar Ternera. They were named Arcadio and Aureliano Jose. Aureliano Jose became the leader of Macondo. Santa Sofia was hired by Pilar as Arcadio's concubine, and he ended up marrying her. The fourth generation. Arcadio and Sofia had Remedios, the most beautiful girl in Macondo. She didn't have a lover but had many suitors, and she rose to the sky one afternoon. Arcadio and Sofia next had twins, Jose Arcadio Segundo and Aureliano Segundo. Aureliano Segundo had Fernanda del Carpio as his wife but had Petra Cotes as his beloved mistress. Fernanda became the second matriarch of the Buendias after Ursula, since Ursula's age can no longer hold on to being the matriarch. The fifth generation. Jose Arcadio II is Mimi's brother, was brought up by Ursula. He was sent to the Vatican to become the Pope as what Ursula wished, but came back with nothing. Renata Remedios, aka Mimi, was Fernanda and Aureliano Segundo's second child. She was sent abroad to study music, and there she fell in love with Mauricio Babilonia and had an illegitimate son, Aureliano III. Fernanda adopted Aureliano III and pretended that he was adopted. Amaranta Ursula, the last child of Fernanda and Aureliano II. Second to the last, which is the sixth generation, Amaranta Ursula had a sexual relationship with Aureliano II, not knowing that he was her nephew. Aureliano II, Babilonia, is Mimi's illegitimate child. Everyone thought he was adopted. He stayed in Macondo even though the town is already falling into ruins. Ursula and Fernanda dies and he was left alone to stay at Buendia's home. He found parchments made by Melquiades, which was actually the real fortune of the whole Buendia from Arcadio Sr. down to his own death. And the last but not the least, the seventh generation. Aureliano III is Mimi and Aureliano Babylonia's son. He was born with a pig's tail as a result of mutation from incest. His father was stricken with grief that he forgot about Aureliano III, that aunts have devoured the last of the Buendia's bloodline.
Good day, everyone. I am Elme Biligi, and today I will be talking about the themes of 100 Years of Solitude. As we all know, themes are the fundamental and often universal ideas explored in a literary work. So without further ado, let's talk straight about the first theme. First up, time. For the characters in the novel, time alternatively moves quickly and stagnate for years. In general, children grow up quickly, but when they are adults, particularly the male adults, time abandons them, leaving them to sit with their own nostalgia and bitterness for years on end. Time abandons Colonel Aureliano Buendia after the civil wars, and Jose Arcadio II, both of them locked in the Melquiades laboratory, refusing to join the living or moving world. In her later years, when Ursula considers her family, time appears to be moving in a circle. New children turn out to be like their ancestors, only horribly exaggerated in some flaw or strength. Time is indeed moving in a circle in this book, but instead of expanding outward, it is collapsing in on the Buendia family as their eventual demise draws closer. Marquez's point is that time moves in circles and cycles, and people are not always progressing. Next theme is incest. Incest is a secondary theme of Solitude. It plays an enormous role in the novel. From the very beginning, with Ursula's warning that children born of incestuous relationships may be born with the tail of pigs. And indeed, at the very end of the novel, a Bendia is born with the tail of a pig. For most families, incest is not a great threat. The fact that it is something the Bundiyas have to keep on dodging marks them as a family and able to escape the family homestead and able to look out themselves. They are too solitary. Essentially, incest is the practice of keeping family members within the family, so it marks the Bundiya as too disengaged from the world around them, in which incest or incestuous relationships are important for Bindiyas because it is a mark for their family in keeping their bloodline. Magic realism. Critics often classify Marquez's writing as magic realism because of his combination of the real and the fantasy. The novel carefully balances realistic elements of life like poverty and house cleaning with the strangest instances like a levitating priest. There are many purposes of this. One is to introduce the reader to Marquez's Colombia, where myths, portents, and legends exist side by side with technology and modernity. Another reason for this is to lead the reader to question what is real and what is fantasy, especially in the realm of politics. It is to force to question the absurdity of our everyday lives. Fourth theme would be religion. In Solitude, organized religion is often the subject of jokes and satire. One of the novel's most unsympathetic characters, Fernanda del Carpio, is a fervent Catholic who thinks nothing of putting her own child in a convent and forgetting about her. Maconda's priest, Father Necador, is trotted out again and again for comic relief. In general, organized religion is regarded with skepticism. Characters who follow the path of God in an unconventional but moral way, like Ursula, are treated with more dignity and respect.
Hi, this is Glennie Rabaya, and we'll have a continuation with the themes. So the next theme we have is civilization. So the novel follows the town of Macondo from its founding to its demise. It basically follows from the beginning of when the town of Macondo first started until the death or the end of this property, also called Utopic Town. So in between, there is prosperity, growth, war and civil strife, as well as modernity and progress, and a cataclysmic event that leads to its downfall and eventual demise. Some critics have noted that the book also follows the trajectory of classical Greek civilization. So what they actually meant there is that it follows the path of the way a typical classic Greek civilization is like, and that was applied to the novel with its careful recording of how and when science, art, and politics come to Macondo. So the author had this overall vision of Macondo as a lens through which all human history and all human nature can be seen. So he wanted his readers to see everything that is happening in the world through the use of this small, isolated town. So the next theme we have are the plagues. There are at least two definite plagues that came to Macondo, and the first one being the insomnia plague. So a little bit of a backstory. This plague originated from this mysterious orphan girl from La Guajira. Her name was Rebecca, and she was entrusted to the Bundias, and apparently this girl is mute, lacks understanding of Spanish, and rejects any food. But during the night, she sneaks out eating dirt and lime from the walls. And when Visitation saw Rebecca's situation, that's when she realized that the insomnia plague has certainly reached Macondo. So this disease was described in a manner wherein if a person was infected, the person will experience sleeplessness and wakefulness. And once he get used to that kind of feeling, the recollection of his childhood began to be erased from his memory, and then later on the name and the notion of things, and finally the identity of people, and even the awareness of his one being, until he sank into a kind of idiocy that had no past. The author actually made a reference of Alzheimer's disease in his novel, and the next plague are the rains that lasted for almost 5 years. So this plague is the only plague that brought about the eventual downfall of the town. There are several plagues that happened, but this one really literally wiped out everything, even the island itself. And that was God's punishment to the people in that certain town. The next theme is politics. The twisted and endearing world of politics is under a great deal of scrutiny in this novel, particularly the chapters that deal with Colonel Aureliano Buendia. So the author wanted to portray politics as a matter of showing to his readers or audiences how the nature of Latin American politics is towards absurdity, denial, and never-ending repetitions of tragedy. That just shows how the world of politics is a gloomy one. Then the second to the last theme is modernity. So this theme is particularly important for the chapters dealing with the banana plantation. In the span of only a few years, Macondo is transformed from a sleepy backwater to a frighteningly modern town via the influences of technology, economic exploitation, and foreign invasion. But the arrival of new machines and farming techniques do not make Macondo a better place to live in. In fact, things only get worse. The point of this is that modern technology is meaningless without a concurrent improvement in ethics, and progress turns brutal without a plan to lessen economic inequality. And the last theme is female sexuality. Although a lesser theme in the novel, important patterns surface regarding the theme of women's sexuality. In general, the women who have unconventional relationships like Rebecca, Petra Curtis, Amaranta Ursula are happier and more sympathetic than the women who cling to society's standards of behavior like Amaranta and Fernando del Carpio. The fact that Aureliano Segundo's coupling with Petra Curtis dramatically increases the proliferation of his animals is a signal that free love can be healthy for society at large.